Reading with your kids.
Hola, niha, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful and historic neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcasts. We want to invite all the authors and aspiring authors who are listening to the podcast to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please be sure to click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the entire world. Now, you know, if you are an author, especially an independent or self-published author, you probably had no idea that when you were writing your book and getting it published, you had no idea that once that book was published, that you became the CEO of a small business, your book business. Yeah, it is. It's a business now. And you had no idea that there are literally thousands of books published every single... You thought I was going to say year. No. There are thousands of books published every single month. It is so hard for a book to stand out in that crowd, especially an independent or sub-published book. But we would love to help you do that. If you visit readingwithyourkids.com and click on that Authors Click Here button, you will discover how you can be a guest here on the podcast. Being a guest gives you the chance to tell the world all about your book. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You can also learn about our Certified Great Read program. This is a program that has helped so many authors. You can also discover our monthly promotion program. We're really excited. We've helped so many authors to date, and we would love to help you. Please go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Idaho. Our guest is here today to celebrate his debut children's book. It's called Tumbleweed the Cowboy Flamingo. Please welcome to the show, Ricky Adams. Hey, Ricky, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm delighted to have you on. Tell us all about Tumbleweed, please.
Yeah, so Tumbleweed the Cowboy Flamingo is my debut novel. I originally wrote it for my son 3 years ago as a Christmas present. He started transitioning from picture books to wanting chapter books, and he's a sensitive child, so we quickly realized that there wasn't a ton of content out there that was low conflict and didn't have violence or character conflict. So I decided to write my own, and I didn't expect to publish it, but here I am. So Tumbleweed the Cowboy Flamingo is about Tumbleweed. It's during the year 1849, and he lives on the East Coast when suddenly he's beckoned to the West Coast to help out a family member and decides to travel across the Americas during the historic California Gold Rush.
Wow, what a cool adventure. That's, for some reason, that is a time that I've become really interested in. I don't think we know enough about that time. So what a great way to start piquing kids' interest in really the birth of our greater country. We talk about the Pilgrims and the settlers and the first war, but it's that migration across the country that connected the East and the West Coast that was really what started, what helped create the America that we're experiencing today.
Yeah, it was, I didn't really know a whole lot about it going into it. I kind of had these characters in mind, and throughout the writing process, I did research and read up on it a little bit. It also includes a glossary of cowboy terms. So I learned a whole bunch of like cowboy terms or terms that were pretty popular during that time period and include them in the writing, and then a glossary in the back. I call them cowboy terms, but they're just kind of loosely based around that time period.
Now, you brought up that there wasn't a lot of content out there for, I think you used the term sensitive kids, and that's how you perceived your child. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that term?
Yeah, so my wife and I believe that there's like a highly sensitive people.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty well documented at this point. And we believe our son is one of those people. He's very affected by any sort of like violence or even like character conflict, name calling, anything of that nature. So if there's a malicious character, an evil character in a book, it would weigh on him. And a lot of our reading is done right at bedtime. So that's kind of like part of our bedtime routine. And, we would introduce these books or these characters, and he would have nightmares, or it would, weigh on his conscience for days. And so there are authors out there that we have found that we really enjoy, like Reg Down, Siggy Dave, Francesca, people of that nature who write. It's a little bit more Waldorf educated based, but it is seems to be a little bit more on the sensitive side. There's less conflict.
So as you're talking about finding, or I guess curating is the kind of word that we use these days. As we're curating content for our kids that we perceive or believe or have noticed are sensitive, we're not talking about eliminating all of the kind of conflict that they may experience, but it's just for certain times of the day. Am I getting that right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, conflict historically makes great plots. Like that's, traditionally. And I think my message with kind of like where I'm coming from, and I founded with my book, Gentle Fawn Publishing, and the idea is to kind of publish more books that are towards that kind of low conflict, gentler side, but still providing worth and wonder through my stories. It is kind of like towards the end of the day seems to be when I would prefer to read stuff that is on lower conflict. But I also think that the biggest thing is just kind of understanding where your child's at and what content you want to expose to them. Something that I've learned is throughout parenting, we kind of get to choose which content we expose our children to. And I think that sometimes is forgotten, that you can, skim through a book and decide if it's right for your child at that stage of life, or if maybe you want to wait, a couple of years.
Yeah, it's interesting that you picked the term, choosing what content your kids are going to experience. That certainly is true when the kids are younger, not so much when they get to be, 10, 11, even 8 or 9 years old. But it's important, I think, because the choices that we make for our kids as they're younger, and especially if we're talking to our kids about why we make those choices, that's going to affect the choices that they develop and make for themselves as they get older, as they're experiencing content on their own, whether it's through social media or going to the library or movies or whatnot. And I think that can be really beneficial. I'm guessing that you and your wife are probably talking to your kid or planning to talk to your child about their personality and why you're picking these types of books, why you decided to write Tumbleweed the Cowboy Flamingo, and that might help your child when they get to be 9, a teenager, sit down and think, wow, do I really want to read a murder mystery before I go to bed, or do I want to read something else?
Yeah, no, very true. And you're right. I think it does translate into, adult life that we're at a time where we have unlimited content available to us at our fingertips, and maybe a murder mystery or watching, a murder documentary right before bed. It's not a great choice for an adult who, feels that. But yeah, we've had that conversation with my son, and when we go to the library, he is also, cognitive of it. He picks out books that are more interested in what he's interested in at the time, and can kind of choose on his own now a little bit of like, this is maybe right for me during the day, but I'm not going to read this like closer to bedtime, or this isn't quite right for me just yet.
Yeah. And this is a really good skill, I think, to teach our kids. It's the same thing as we teach our kids, wow, you don't seem to do so well when you have a lot of dairy and you don't feel really great. And maybe we make our choices as to what to eat based on that. I think helping adults, because when it comes to things like dairy and eating, it seems like adults need more help than kids. But just, helping our kids understand who we are, that we are all different, that we all do have individual needs, and I think it can be a really useful thing for parents to do with their kids.
Yeah, definitely. And I've gotten feedback from parents of children who have read it and children who read, high conflict or, more intense stories. And they also enjoy it. So I think that there's something about letting the brain kind of relax and you're not having to be on the edge of your seat that makes certain, gentler books enjoyable, because you kind of know going into it that you're not going to get startled, or there's not going to be like a crazy twist. It's almost like that slice of life kind of mentality where like, okay, I know I'm just going to feel good after reading this.
So I'm curious, this is your debut book. Did you always kind of have in the back of your mind that you wanted to be an author, or was it just like, I need to do this for my kid?
I never thought in my life that I'd be doing this. By day, I'm a systems analyst kind of IT kind of guy. So that's what comes kind of natural to me. I did do 8 years of cartooning when I was a kid, and I was in AP art and kind of that advanced art all throughout high school. And so I dreamed of kind of doing that one day. I always kind of wanted to be a Disney illustrator when I was, a small child. And I got into graphic design outside of college, and that was not kind of the path that was kind of sticking for me. So I kind of have always done doodles, and kind of especially when my son was born, we started to draw more together and kind of explore art together. And so what kind of started off with Tumbleweed was just the drawing of Tumbleweed itself that I actually drew 22 years ago, just popped into my mind. And that's kind of stuck with me ever since. A lot of my characters do, where I just kind of continue to draw them, and then I can kind of start to develop stories out of it. And the writing really came about from the idea of what am I going to read to him tonight? We don't really have a new book. And I was like, it would be a great Christmas present if I wrote him, a book. And it was just going to be that at first. And then as I read it and started developing it after that Christmas present, because I didn't have it all the way panned out, it was kind of like a 25% Christmas present at the time. I kind of realized this is something that has really kind of helped me out as a person, and kind of developing things that I enjoy doing, and realizing that if I'm having a hard time finding this sort of content, maybe other parents are too, and this could be an additional resource for them. So decided to put it out that way. Now I've found it to be something that I love to do. I love drawing. I love writing. So I'll probably continue to do this. I have a couple other concepts in mind that I'm working on right now. But yeah, that's it's become a very close to heart passion project for me.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned again that your child is sensitive. Because we're learning so much about kids, and the fact that kids are individuals and can be very different. Is this when we say that your kid is especially sensitive or very sensitive, is that part of being on the spectrum, or is it something completely different?
I believe it's something completely different. I think that some people just are very sensitive in an empathetic way, and they can really feel and touch and tap into their emotions more than some other people can. And what I've noticed is from him, when something happens in real life or something happens in a book, it really like sticks with him. And I think that's what I feel like makes the difference between somebody who's maybe highly sensitive and, you know, we're all sensitive, but somebody who's highly sensitive is when something happens or they take in certain content, it really sticks with them and it wears on them and it kind of eats away at them and they feel what that character is feeling. Whereas some of us can maybe disassociate a little bit from it and realize that, you know, that's not necessarily me or those aren't my feelings that I need to be having. I think highly sensitive people have a harder time with that, where they feel the exact feelings that other person's feeling or that other character's feeling.
One of the things that we've talked about when we talk about kids in the past, we've talked about kids who have ADHD or dyslexia, and a lot of the authors who experience that themselves talk about the fact that, I look at that as my superpower right now. As you were describing your son and having this great empathy for others and people they meet in real life or people that they meet through story, as having all this empathy, I'm thinking that could be a real superpower in some ways. Have you thought about that, and is that something that you've talked with your child about?
It is, yeah. He realizes that that he can tap into that, and we've talked about kind of exercises as far as like it is a superpower. Like, you know, I'm in my adult life and I'm still trying to work out on myself and work on, you know, feelings and tapping into being more empathetic, and to just have that naturally is a gift and it's a superpower. We've talked about it too, and I think the thing that we've talked about the most is when you can feel those feelings, to not let it overcome you sometimes. Because when you're having all of those really strong feelings all of the time and you're, you know, empathizing with everybody, it can be, you know, overwhelming, and you can get to the end of the day and just feel exhausted, emotionally exhausted. So, yeah, I think both sides of it. You mentioned dyslexia, though. It was one thing that's always kind of deterred me from writing is when I was younger, I did have dyslexia for a couple of years, and I always thought that I was not very good at writing or English, and kind of that was the message that I kind of got growing up. So I kind of steered away from it. So it's been very, what's it called? Not rewarding, but like rejuvenating, like my belief in myself and like being able to, you know, the feedback I'm getting on the novel and everything is very like touching to like hear that, okay, maybe this is like actually something I have been good at. I've just been kind of burying it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it is really hard. If we've heard all our lives that we're not good at something, it's really hard to kind of convince ourselves, well, maybe they're wrong and maybe I can do this. So I'm really happy that you found that strength and that resiliency, and that you're finding a lot of joy in writing right now, and that you're bringing a lot of joy to families with Tumbleweed and the stories that this flamingo is getting involved in. Are you thinking that Tumbleweed is going to be a series, that this character is going to, experience a lot of different adventures that kids can enjoy?
You know, when I first wrote it, I did not think of it as like a series. It was kind of like he's living on the East Coast. He's invited to run a gold mine by his great Uncle Elm. He's going to do the travel across with his friends. And, you know, each chapter is kind of structured around a different town or a different adventure that they stop off on along the way. So it's like they have this map that's included in the front of the book, and you can kind of like travel along with them. And each chapter is like a destination or an adventure that they go on. And that was kind of the premise of it. But since I've released it, a lot of people have been asking if it's going to be a series, or if, you know, they would love to see like more of a series. So possibly in the future, I have some ideas of where we could go from here with this novel. So yes, possibly. I don't have anything in the works right now, but the ideas are flowing.
Yeah. I'm wondering, how does his son feel that his what was intended to be a Christmas gift is now something that's out there in the world?
It's been a fun experience with him, because he actually named my publishing company Gentle Fawn, and the idea was that he also wants to do this. So he's working on his own book right now as well, and kind of developing the story and creating the pictures as well. So the idea was that it was kind of like a father-son thing. So the Christmas present, I guess, would kind of evolved over time. He still has the original one. So the original Christmas present wasn't like this book. It was a watercolor paper of the original drawing, and then it was like hand sewn together with like the pages binded. So, he still has that. So it's just changed over time. But yeah, I think he's happy for me.
And we talk about the benefits of reading with our kids. Can you just talk a little bit about the benefits and what kind of different benefits a kid who is highly sensitive as your son gets from spending time reading with his parents?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've found through my relationship with my son is it's a time for us to connect, and the books that we choose kind of invites us both into this like world, and it's a world that we can both experience, and we can learn these characters, and we can empathize with the characters and kind of see these different stages of life and learn while reading together. And I think the biggest thing is it's just a time for us to be able to connect. The time that we mostly read together is right before bed, and that's the time that I can read. I can pause and ask questions, and it's almost like a passageway from the end of the day to nighttime. So it's a really special time for both of us to kind of bond together over the books that we choose to read, and then with the right books, being able to like almost create like the dreams that he can like then shift into.
And it makes a lot of sense that what we're thinking about before we go to sleep is probably what we're going to be dreaming about. And, when we talk about our little kids, it's probably a lot better for those kids to be thinking about a lovable, helpful, caring, sensitive flamingo named Tumbleweed than it would be for them to be thinking about a lot of really crazy or violent or scary thoughts. So I'm really happy that this book is out there, and that your son, decided to share his Christmas gift with the world.
Yeah, me too. And yeah, like what you mentioned, I think it's each child's individual. Like everybody's unique, and so what might be right for one might be not right for another. So what I found is this is what's right for our family. So maybe it's right for other people's families as well, or it's right for at a different time. So. I've just, through this experience, I've really learned that everybody is very unique, and each person's, an individual. And so what's right for one person might not be right for another person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think everyone would agree that it would be the right time to tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Tumbleweed the Cowboy Flamingo and find out more about you.
Yeah, so I don't have a website yet, so right now I'm just on Instagram. My handle is Gentle Fawn Publishing, and on there I'm posting all the updates about the books, any like sales or deals that I see. But I'm also kind of giving some tips for like bedtime, improving your bedtime, or how to like scan books and what to kind of look for. So just some helpful tips on there. I also do illustrating videos, so I'll go on there and paint or do my illustrations. That's another thing I didn't mention about the book is each chapter has various illustrations throughout it, which I also did. So that was kind of what started the whole process, was the illustration, and then the writing came after. But yeah, and then other than that, I'm on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and then I have a profile on Goodreads as well.
Wonderful. We've had a really fun time speaking to the author of Tumbleweed the Cowboy Flamingo, the debut children's book from our guest, Ricky Adams. Hey, Ricky, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.